We're currently in an odd place when it comes to smartphones. For years, the proving grounds for companies were the cameras, but the focus mostly shifted to AI.
Artificial intelligence powered by Galaxy AI.
I have a feeling that someone out there might be counting how many times we have mentioned AI today.
I do blame AI for making recent smartphone updates feel more incremental than ever. But that doesn't mean there aren't improvements here worth talking about when it comes to cameras. The new Samsung S25 Ultra comes with an improved ultrawide lens, which also means better macro photography. It also has log video and a few other tricks worth trying out, including the new AI audio processing. It all sounds very similar to the updates we've seen come to the iPhone 16 Pro, so it does make perfect sense to compare the two phones. And you know what? We always start with photos, so let's try something new. Let's do video first. Alright, it seems like every single time that I start working on a camera review, it starts raining in San Francisco. But we're going to take advantage of that. So we're going to go to Chinatown, try out the camera for the very first time, film some log videos, take some photos, and compare it to the iPhone. So here we're looking at videos filmed with the S25 in log video. What is log video? It is a flat, uncompressed video file allowing for more dynamic and tonal range, which can then easily be manipulated in the edit. It currently looks terrible, but once you add color to it, it looks real nice. It is a feature mostly aimed at videographers and folks who want to go the extra step to make their video clips feel and look a little bit different. Or also just for people who want to start experimenting with video editing and color grading. And having that on your phone is a perfect entry point into that world. The S25 also makes it really easy to use. So the difference between the iPhone and the Ultra is that you can shoot in a much smaller and less intensive H.265 format within Samsung's native camera app. On the iPhone, you have to seek out third-party apps like Kino or Apple's own Final Cut Camera. The iPhone native camera app lets you film log, but only in ProRes format, which is rarely useful since the files that you get are just absolutely huge. It is a minor difference between the two systems, but a difference that actually makes me want to use log video far more frequently on a Samsung phone and not the iPhone. Okay, so what else is different here between the two phones? The iPhone can film 120 frames per second in 4K in log, and S25's slow motion only works with color baked in. On the other hand, the Ultra can film in 8K, so it is up to you to decide which one you prefer, more pixels or more frames. I'm picking frames for now because the extra resolution doesn't impress me. 4K on a small sensor looks good enough as it is. But I am impressed by what we can do with audio processing these days. So the new feature on the S25 Ultra, just like the iPhone, is that now you can use AI to clean up the audio in your video. So if there's noise, like when there's music, it'll clean that up. So I'm gonna start moving, and you're gonna tell me which one sounds better to you. Should be windy enough, and a little bit of noise from the snowboard. We're gonna go back and forth. So now is the iPhone. Now the Samsung one. Whoa. And yeah, you tell me how that sounds. So looking back at these videos, they both sound fine. They do clean up the noise and distractions well, but they also make me sound robotic as hell. Snowboarding right now. We're gonna switch back and forth. You tell me which one. I think we're at the point where this is more of a party trick, and in some cases it helps to salvage audio, so it's not entirely unusable. Don't expect studio quality audio from either phones here. But that's enough about video stuff, let's talk about photos. The next update comes to the ultrawide lens, which is now capable of taking 50 megapixel photos with a little bit of help from pixel binning. Apple also updated the ultrawide in the iPhone 16 Pro last year, and that 48 megapixel lens received lots of praise. It is a much needed update, but I'm here to tell you that Samsung did it better. The very first thing you'll notice when comparing the ultrawide lenses between the two phones is how much better the Samsung one is in low light, especially when dealing with vignetting that you get in the corners on the iPhone one. The one big reason for it is that the aperture of this lens is greater than the iPhone one, f1.9 on the Samsung versus f2.2 on the iPhone. Numerically, this sounds small, but in practice, this means these sensors can capture more light. And more light means Samsung gets the edge in darker conditions. With each and every blind test I conducted by myself or with our staff, most of us kept picking Samsung photos as the ones that look better. The photos are sharper, the edges are crisper, the details are just better. Especially when it comes to portrait mode. This is where you can notice that really easily. I mean, just look at Theo here. The edges around his curls, while not perfect, are far more believable. The same goes with people and objects here too. The long exposure astrophotos are also better than the iPhone equivalents until you start noticing some odd artifacts that show up randomly in some photos. I mean, what is this? Time and time again, I've noticed a lot more weird coloring choices from the S25, like the sky here. It looks far more purple and blue in these videos and photos than it did in real life. I gotta tell you, in real life, that sky is not that blue. And deciding which one you prefer might come down to taste, which is a very subjective thing. But the sky is more objective than that. If you don't care about color accuracy, but want a punchier looking image, you probably won't find this as a negative. But I do. Once you notice it, it's almost hard to ignore. And that has been the case with Samsung phones for a while now. We mention it almost every year. Again, when it comes to overall look of the photos, in nearly every side-by-side photo, Samsung kept the images a lot cooler and a lot more blue. Even though it is sometimes hard to ignore the amount of detail you get from Samsung photos, I tend to prefer the look of iPhone images. It makes choices that are better suited for what I want out of a phone. It's also interesting to look at how these two phones handle shadows. I'm almost surprised how different these photos are. The iPhone raised these shadows to an unacceptable level while Samsung kept it true to life. But the good news is that phone makers have recently realized not everyone wants that, and they gave us back control over how images are processed. So with the release of the iPhone 16 Pro, Apple introduced photographic styles. I've had mine set to lower the shadows for such a long time, I almost forgot what the default iPhone look is anymore. I made a whole video about it if you want to find out more. Unsurprisingly, Samsung also has that feature now, so if you don't like the default processing, you now have the option to change the overall look for good. But let's go back to this example because I want to talk about noise and noise reduction here. The iPhone desperately tries to clean up any noise in images and it does a really good job, while Samsung lets noise be noise. I don't like noisy images, so I am very okay with what iPhone is doing here. Okay, so to answer the question, which one wins? So time and time again, Samsung has won me over with just the amount of details that you can get from the photos. And in nearly every test I've done between the two phones, Samsung won. Better ultrawide, better main camera, better night photos, better portrait mode. And it even has one extra lens, which I've used a lot more than I initially thought that I would. And as much as I don't love the processing that you get from the Samsung, you can change some things around. So I am a sucker for detail and sharp edges, and Samsung did pretty good here. And there's one more thing that it has going for it, which doesn't have anything to do with the sensor size, aperture, or the image processing. And that is the screen. We gotta talk about the screen. I truly believe that the photos that you take with your smartphone, most of the time you will be looking at those photos on the smartphone. The screen is important, and the Ultra's nearly matte, non-reflective screen is extremely sharp and is just a joy to look at. But more importantly, the perception of those photos, when you look at them on the screen, it makes a difference, and those photos on that screen look fantastic. And lastly, your choice might not be dependent on the camera system at all if you're picking between the two phones, but rather which operating system you prefer and which ecosystem you're already locked in. All of you can talk about that down below in the comments, but for me, it is still the iPhone and it's still iOS. And even as the focus has shifted mostly to AI, there are some good year-over-year improvements coming to the cameras. The changes might not seem as groundbreaking as they did years ago, but the fact that companies are giving control over how our photos and videos look, it is a big win for us. Don't take it for granted. 1, thank you for watching. 2, there's another thing I wanted to add. You can shoot ultra-wide and 50 megapixel, but each time you have to change from 12 to 50 megapixel, unless you preserve settings so every time you open up the camera app you can use 50 megapixel photos, but then you lose access to some of the other lenses, and I don't love that. So I just kept using 12 megapixels for everything, so yeah, that's it.